All right, welcome back. So we're going to delve into some conversations of what we started this morning and give you a chance to then take those conversations and make them real for yourself or your group or your partner or whoever you're here with. So as we get started, just a reminder of our purpose, right, is to take the experts here of Kelly Gallagher and Penny Kittle, remembering that we have these 4 days to walk through these planning decisions and conversations that they did, that we also can have with ourselves, but to also know that we have the advantage of having them come in the summer. So in maybe a rare instance where you're like, man, I just wish I could ask them. In this case, you actually can. So keep track of those questions and things that do go left unanswered, as they will be here this summer as a part of our work. So our inclusion activity for the afternoon is to consider the most important point. So what was your most important point of learning from the morning session that you attended? So let's take a moment just to reflect on the learning that you had from the morning. It could be the breakout session. It could have been, or the session, or it could have been the article analysis. So what of the morning was the most important point of learning? So let's just take a couple minutes to write a note, and then we'll get a chance to share that out. So again, just take a couple minutes. Important point of learning from the morning. Go ahead. Close. All right, well, thank you for delving into that to speak to what spoke to you from the morning. And we're going to delve deeper then into what we started. So as we know, the outcomes for our sessions together are to work through these 4 components. Again, if you'd take a moment to read through these. Knowing that for day 2, we're very much focused on exploring that mapping for reading and writing instruction over the course of the year. So we're delving deeper into that and what that looks like in that analysis in this session, this day. So in our agenda, and again, because this morning we didn't get into feedback and evaluation, we likely are going to focus around a large portion, or the time being focused on mapping that year of reading and mapping that year of writing and what that might look like. The PowerPoint is at the Google Classroom. I did that over lunch because I realized this morning I'd forgotten to do it. So I got that in there. So if you wanted to follow along with the PowerPoint, again, you'll find it very similar to the morning, just has the key language behind the activities that we're doing to actually look at your mapping, if you will. And I think at this point we've got it down, but I incorporated the slide so we could get to Google Classroom. So I want to delve into mapping the year of reading. So there was a nice video I felt that set up the stage for this conversation. We know from the book that the pieces that they incorporated, those macro level components, if you will, they looked for that idea of independent reading, book clubs, student tools, and then core text. Those were kind of those big pieces that they highlight in this chapter. One of the things I think of interest that we did already discuss was that idea of when the class or the school-wide or classroom-wide conversation was going on was not necessarily at the beginning of the year, but more in the middle, right? Because they wanted to build that love, as they use the term, or really the capacity or the ability of kids to really get into reading. So why continue on with reading the way it's always been when kids are going to feel the way they've always felt about it? Build that confidence through that independent reading and get them encouraged by the idea of reading and the concept of reading and where they see themselves as readers, to then go to that classroom level, all focused on the one book, if you will. So even just those little pieces, I think, were quite interesting to me as a consideration, right? So they only have the 2 books. They do them toward the end of each semester. And mainly they provide evidence around the fact that they do that because they want the kids to have built that reader identity or ability, or reading stamina, as they use that term. So we're going to watch a video on them quickly of just speaking a little bit more to that idea. And then I've got an activity slide to set you up into delving into what that conversation would look like for you in your building. We're going to go into a work session where what I'd like you to do is, and you may have this online, however it's available to you, but sketch out your current scope and sequence that you have for your year, semester, or the next couple months, right? So you think of the scope. If I were to have you consider your year from here forward, and that seems too vast, you heard Penny speak to that a little bit, like it's hard to imagine 6 weeks out, etc. So whatever you're comfortable with, I don't want you to over focus on that. But consider the following. So what is that duration of time going to look like? More guidance on that on page 46. What is the actual reading that's going to happen in the text or the unit? So like when we say reading, you might say amount of time. You might say the text you're going to use. What are the skills that will be utilized? So this gets back to those core concepts we spoke to. Remember there were those 5 components in that we reflected on this morning. And then once you have that sketched out, right, it's one thing to macro out whatever duration of time you're thinking. Then we want to reflect on what are the student tools or the core elements that we need to keep in mind to make sure that we're getting that then forward to the students, right? So what are the scaffolds that we're going to use? Whether the scaffolds are actual student tools or the things that we need to when we think about what are the skills that are at play that we might need to incorporate along with. So using those resources, and then are there changes or what might your scope and sequence look like, or is it going to stay the same? So if you already have something, you're validating it with a lot of this thinking that we've been introduced to around the core beliefs and the student tools. Or if you were thinking changes that might be in order as you talk about it, what might those changes be and look like? So we'll take a good chunk of time, probably 20 minutes or so, to give you a chance to kind of dialogue and process. And what I'm going to do is just kind of come check in at your tables over that time just to kind of see where you're at. And then I can provide clarity or support or an extra person to have a conversation around. But by all means, float around the room, bounce ideas off each other. If you connected with somebody's idea from this morning, you want to go deeper into that, by all means, feel free to approach that person or work in your group as you are. All right? So I want to give us a chance to kind of really look at mapping your year in reading. Or if it's not a year, what is that time duration? What questions might you have? And I tried to reference the book pages for your support. And then to a close. So hopefully you're having good conversation. If you want to continue the reading conversation, I would understand. But we also spoke to writing this morning. So around this mapping that year of writing, we talked about that balance. We did go in depth, remember, into those units of study and what they looked like and how they had them paced. Start with that finish line in mind, plan, and we took a little more time on conferring this morning as well. So I tried to highlight those big ideas, but when I said duration of time, right, that's the projected scope and sequence of the units. And then I highlighted the other pages that we really spoke to. So again, what changes might you make in that scope and sequence? What will stay the same, etc. So I just wanted to kind of highlight a halfway point of our session this afternoon so you could transition to writing. But if reading's going along where it needs to be, this is your time for that conversation. So I don't want to necessarily butt in, and I'll continue to mill around to the different tables and check in. Also, if you need to take a break, right? So I'm not doing like an official thing, but you're welcome to step out. Cell phone things come up, I get it. But we're just maintaining this, and we'll work pretty much till about 5 till from this point. But I'll be checking in with your tables. All right. So having had a chance with that reading and writing conversation, what I'd like to do is just take a minute. And what are some things that you see as being vital to communicate back to your building or reading or writing team? And what is that avenue of how you will go about communicating that? So what do the folks that are not here today, whether they be leaders or colleagues in your department or other departments, whatever your scope or lens is, what are those pieces of information that need to be communicated back? And what is that best mode of communication? Again, newsletter, email, etc. So just take a minute to kind of reflect on discussions that you've had. And I'll pull us back together to talk about how we'll wrap up the day.